So I think in hindsight, it was a bit of a judgment call. Maybe we should have taken the money. Who knows? Maybe
It
things.
was a non-tech call. It was on you.
Actually,
Welcome to Ofofo Studio. My guest for today is Mauktik Kulkarni. Mauktik is a filmmaker, entrepreneur, neuroscientist, and a renowned author. Mauktik, how do you manage to do all of this, man? Like, it's very, just saying that is a lot. I can't even imagine doing that.
it's been quite a long journey, to be honest. I didn't start out doing all of these things. I think a lot of this stuff happened organically. So my beginning, like a lot of other Indians, was with engineering, and I think since I come from a family of doctors, I was always interested in sort of engineering applications in the healthcare world. So
Nice,
I think that's how the shift to neuroscience happened. And then I think everything else that happened after that, so the startups that I was involved in, or the travels that happened, or even writing and filmmaking that came after that.
Right.
It's a over a period of say 10, 15, 20 years. So
course, yeah.
it's been quite an exciting journey. It's only getting better. So
So after engineering, like once you're finished engineering, you went on to study more into neurosciences, right?
right.
So I understand the prompt being like, you came from a family of doctors,
Uh-huh.
but it was still a significant step to take. Like, why choose that?
So I think
And where
there's
did you
a-
do it too?
Yeah, so there's a couple of interesting thoughts regarding that. So one is that there's a lot of applications of electronics engineering which I studied
Right.
in the healthcare world now. So you
Yeah.
can imagine any kind of equipment, medical device that you use today in a doctor's office. There's a lot of engineering that goes into it.
Right.
So I was always fascinated by that, but more importantly, when you start thinking about information processing in the world of electronics,
Right.
there are lots of applications of that, or at least there are lots of ideas from that world that are applicable to understanding how the brain works.
Right.
Because all said and done, it might be a biological organ, but its primary job is to take in all the
Process,
information, and then process it and make sense of it.
Yeah.
So there are lots of insights both ways. So insights from the brain world, neuroscience world that are quite useful to engineering,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot of data processing and data analysis techniques from the engineering world
Right.
that are quite useful to understand how the brain operates.
Right.
And I think what helped me in making that transition was the fact that in the United States, it's been a normal practice for the last at least 30 to 40 years to allow people from various different backgrounds to come to neuroscience and use their knowledge from that discipline to help understand the brain. Because even today,
Yeah.
it's the least understood organ in the human body.
Absolutely.
So they need insights from all different disciplines to really crack the code of how the brain works. So it's relatively new in India, I know. I was just at IISc the other day, and a couple of my friends from the neuroscience world, they've become professors there now.
Nice.
So they keep telling me that it's difficult to recruit students
Of
from
course.
engineering to neuroscience,
Yeah.
but it's quite common in the US. So that's how I managed to do the transition,
Mm-hmm.
and absolutely no regrets. Had a blast.
Yeah. And what insights? So, like, can you take us through some of the insights that you got after you got into the neurosciences program?
hmm So I think you look at even something like visual processing,
Right.
processing visual information, processing auditory information.
Right.
There are lots of parallels in the way how, let's say, a computer vision person would approach image processing
Right.
and how the brain does it, especially the early stages of information processing in the brain,
Mm-hmm.
and what a computer vision scientist would do. They're very similar. So you're trying to detect, you're given a natural scene. Your first job is to detect where the edges are.
Correct.
And then, second stage is, how are the edges coming together to define an object?
Right.
Does this edge belong to the background or the foreground?
Hmm.
So these kinds of early stages of processing are very similar in computer vision and how the brain does it.
Yeah.
Certainly, when it gets to higher level of processing, we are still trying to crack the code in the brain.
What are examples of higher level processing?
So higher level processing is, how certain kinds of memories are formed,
Got
right?
it. Yeah.
You're looking at a visual object. How is it exactly stored in the brain?
Mm-hmm.
It's still a bit of a mystery.
Right.
The type of coding that is used in the brain to store certain memories. Why certain objects become more salient, or
Right.
why do you care
Right.
more about certain objects opposed to some other objects, right?
Correct.
So, what sort of evolutionary paradigms are already built into our brain that allow this kind of discrimination or giving more importance to certain objects opposed to others?
Yeah.
I think those are the things that are still not very well understood, because in computer science, no matter what the object is, if you want to store it, it's the same kind of code, right?
Yeah.
But the brain has a lot of evolutionary biases built into it over thousands of years.
Right.
And so those are the kinds of things that we still don't understand pretty well. There are certainly emotional aspects of it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The things that you care about, you tend to remember.
Perception.
Yeah, exactly. So there's definitely an emotional things that you fear about, right? So those get stored in your memory quite vividly.
Strongly. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's definitely an emotional aspect to it, but again, it's still a very, very loosely understood concept, and that's why, neuroscience as a field, I studied neuroscience 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And now that I've, moved on to other things in life,
Yeah.
and neuroscience has become the hot thing, everybody asks me, like, what's wrong with you?
Yeah. Especially with AI and all. I mean, it's I can't imagine another field being as interesting to anyone.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
brain trying to understand itself.
Yeah, and I mean, interesting and scary, right?
Very, yeah.
So yeah, I think when I was in it, people used to ask me, like, what's wrong with you? Why are you doing neuroscience?
Yeah.
Now that I've left it, everybody's like, why are you leaving neuroscience?
You're just ahead of the curve.
Maybe. But I think that's part of life, right? I think there are certain, phases in your life
Right.
when you're passionate about some aspects, some things in life, and then you've done it. I studied neuroscience, did a little bit of research. I spent about 10-15 years in neuroscience related startups.
Yeah.
And then, it just gets kind of old. You want to do something else. You want a new
kick.
challenge.
Yeah,
exactly. So that's probably the, entrepreneur in you, right?
Right.
You're constantly tweaking things, looking for new things, looking for a new challenge. So it was, definitely an exciting journey while I was in it.
Yeah.
Uh,
Let's talk about the
Sure.
subsequent phases after that.
Sure.
So after that, I know that you went out traveling across the world, to 50 plus countries.
Yeah.
You even covered the entire South America on one motorcycle.
Yeah.
Talk us through that.
Sure, yeah. So, funnily enough, when I was in graduate school for neuroscience, I watched that movie, Motorcycle Diaries, which is on the life of Che Guevara. Yeah. So I watched it and I was just so enamored by all the landscapes that they were showing of South America that I watched it, and the memory that I took away from that movie was the mountains and the beaches and everything that was shown in the movie. So, I mean, as a startup guy, I certainly don't subscribe to communism, which was Che Guevara's, main.
Yeah, but nice
aim.
landscapes, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Motorcycle, nice landscapes. Sign me up.
Right, yeah.
So the day I got my first job, this was in the US. I actually told the company that I need some time off.
Okay. What was the job about?
So this one was actually a great combination of everything I'd studied. This company called Cognition. So it was a small little startup, and their goal was to build a fairly extensive hardware-software platform to collect brainwaves, so your EEG data, then digitize it, send it to a local server, and then based on some machine learning algorithms, try to do early detection of neurological disorders.
Wow. And you put that on hold.
Yeah. So sometimes, this is maybe I should be giving these kinds of insights, but yeah, having been in startups long enough, I also know a little bit of the startup side, right? When a small startup, which is typically constrained on resources and manpower, when they find the right match, they're generally willing to wait for it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're a typical coder, if you have, say, you're a Java programmer, then if you're not willing to take the job, there are 100 other people willing to take the job. Yeah. But then if you bring in, a blend of, say, electronics engineering and neuroscience and, a little bit of understanding of neurological disorders, then you have a little bit of a leverage.
Of course. And I'm sure that's not all as well, because that would have thrown them off. I think this is all good, but I also need to go on my motorcycle.
so yeah, I just politely asked them for a couple of months, and they said, it'd be nice if you can join right away, but if you really need time off, feel free to do that, and you can join in a couple of months, which I think has always been a trend in the US. American culture, American companies, industry in general, they value you going out and doing your own thing if you want to.
Right.
I think that's slowly coming to India now.
Yes.
I would say 10 years ago, if there was a gap in your resume,
right.
So the HR people would look down on it.
Yeah.
But now, they will at least ask, like, okay, what happened? What did you do in this 1 year? Which I think is a good trend, because the more people jump into startups, it's important even for the HR people to know that startups are quite an up and down kind of a journey, right?
Yeah.
So I think I was lucky in the sense that I got those 2 months off. I had this at the back of my mind that I want to do this motorcycle trip. And sometimes ignorance is bliss. I didn't speak any Spanish.
Okay.
And I just had this at the back of my mind that, no matter where I go, I'll always find people who speak English. And I can always get by.
Yeah.
And you can imagine this is 2008. So the first iPhones had just come out.
Right.
I was not in the position to own an iPhone. There were no map apps.
Oh, yeah.
So this is like pre-Google Maps era.
Oh, shit, yeah.
So I literally landed in Peru, a town called Cusco, picked up a motorcycle, and took off with this small little book called Lonely Planet.
Okay.
Which was very popular back in the days.
Yeah, it still is, I think. But smartphones have replaced that. I know a lot of people coming in from outside of India and carrying that thick little guide.
So it used to be a very nice guide for people like me, a lot of backpackers.
Basically. Right, yeah.
Right, people who are traveling on shoestring budgets, want to know where the good places to eat are, if you're looking for a hostel, where to stay, and then maps of all the interesting places. So that's all I had, a motorcycle, a book, and a big ass backpack. So I just took off, and I was on the road for 6 weeks, I think, a little over 6 weeks. And I managed to cover about 8,000 to 9,000 kilometers in 6 weeks.
Holy shit.
So that was Peru, some parts of Peru, then half of Chile, and then western part of Argentina. That's what I covered in that trip.
Nice. What, after that, did you join the job?
Oh, yeah, of course. I had to, because...
did you get called like, Mauktik, are you coming back? No.
I wish I could travel more on that trip, but then obviously the bills were piling up.
Absolutely.
So I had to come back. In fact, the reason why I took that risk and went on that motorcycle trip was I knew that, okay, I have a job to come back to.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to make this much money.
Correct, right.
Which changed 4 years later. We'll get into that.
Okay.
But after this trip, I came back. I joined the company. I, in fact, worked for them for 4 years.
Wow.
And 2 things happened. The startup itself gave me a great product experience, because when I joined, the product was still being developed.
Right.
The platform that I mentioned. So I managed to see the entire product life cycle. So from development to sort of testing, all the QA that you have to do, and then actually rolling out the product. So that was one amazing experience that I had in those 4 years.
I can imagine, yeah.
And that's the time I actually got into writing.
Okay.
So I came back from the trip without really having any intentions of writing a book. I'd never written anything creative before that. But I moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where the first startup was. I was living by myself, and then those memories of everything that happened, they were so vivid.
Yeah.
Because I was traveling solo and I didn't speak the language.
Right.
So
But
maybe
did you learn the language on the course?
I had to.
Yeah, you
I
had
mean,
to.
the basics I absolutely had to. So the first 2 weeks were actually trial by fire. Because I didn't know anything about even asking for directions. If I walk into a restaurant, how do I order food? If I'm looking for a, small hotel to stay, how do I go and ask?
Yeah.
So the good thing is the Lonely Planet Guide has a bit of a phrase book and, all
Nice.
these basic phrases.
Yeah.
They will typically have Spanish translations.
Yeah.
So that helped, but that can only get you so far, right?
Of course, yeah.
If you're immersing yourself in a culture, you want to talk to the local people, you want to
Yes,
get
yeah.
some insights, you
Yeah.
want to know what to avoid,
Right.
what to watch, and all those things. So yeah, the first couple of weeks were quite intense. I had to learn Spanish really fast, and now I can get by. I can definitely fake it.
Like speak it with an accent.
Yeah,
Speak English
exactly.
with a Spanish accent, yeah.
Absolutely. So that's one advantage Indians have actually.
Right.
Because if an American or a European goes to South America and tries to speak the language, a lot of the American European languages, they don't have the harsh
Right, they don't have those
Spanish
sounds, yeah.
pronunciations.
They can enunciate
Yeah.
those better. Yeah.
Exactly. So since our languages have all those enunciations, it's very easy for me to not just get the accent but also the
Yeah, those and all
pronunciations.
that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So it was a fun trip, and then after coming back, since
You started writing because of
yeah, and so the book happened.
What was the name of the book for the listeners?
So the first book that happened to be the first book. It's called A Ghost of Che.
Okay.
So Che Guevara was the inspiration for the trip. So
Right.
I just thought, like a homage to him,
Right.
I'll name the book Ghost of Che.
Okay. Okay. And what was the reception on the book like?
Oh, it was pretty cool. I initially thought that nobody other than my friends and family would buy it.
Yeah.
But then it slowly started reaching, a little bit of extended audiences, friends of friends.
Right.
And, it also got translated into Marathi and Spanish.
Nice.
And so then naturally, the audiences in those languages grew a little bit.
Yeah.
And it was really interesting that before writing the book, I had read a lot of books growing up,
Right.
read a lot of literature, Marathi primarily, and then a little bit of English. But just the idea that so many people will relate to
Your experience.
an Indian guy, going to South America without having any plan,
Yeah.
not speaking any Spanish, and doing a bunch of idiotic things.
Oh.
I thought that, why would anybody care? But it looks like there's a lot of people out there who want
Yeah.
to do these kinds of things.
I'm sure, yeah.
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 So it was great, just that interaction with readers, especially those first emails that the readers send,
Uh-huh.
they're like just blown away generally, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's always fun to, get that kind of feedback from readers. So it was a great experience.
So you wrote this while you were still working with the company
Correct.
that you were working with.
That's right.
And okay. And so why did you move away from the startup?
So I think that 4 year stint had given me the confidence I was looking for. That if I can spot an idea or kind of a product that's probably missing from the market, how do I go from conceptualizing it to maybe even raising funds
Right.
to executing the project and actually delivering the product.
Right.
So once I had that, the back of my mind, I think I always wanted to explore India because I'd done my engineering from India, but I never worked in India.
Right.
And we're talking 2012, 2013.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of buzz in the media about the Indian startup ecosystem. There was a lot of money flowing into the system.
Yeah.
So I thought it would be interesting to come to India and explore what's going on in India. I knew that I would probably have to leave neuroscience behind a little bit
Yeah.
and explore other domains. But I think I was quite excited about that.
What was the shift like?
Oh, the shift took more than a year because I quit my job and
Had to travel again.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it is, this is how life happens, right? When I was on that motorcycle trip, um, I was worried about my next paycheck, and I couldn't start the trip before I got a job offer.
Right.
But then when I was on the trip, I met so many people who had just quit their jobs and they were traveling without a plan. Like,
Right.
this would be a very normal conversation where I go and ask people, like, oh, so, when are you finishing your trip? And, what's
I don't
next?
know. Huh.
And they had no idea.
Right.
They're like, oh, we'll travel until the money runs out. And then, we'll see where we land up and then we'll figure it out.
Yeah.
So I think that was a revelation. That was, a bit of an epiphany for me.
Right. Right.
So when I even joined the company, I think I knew sooner or later
It was.
I'll end up doing that. So when I decided to wrap up and come back to India,
Uh-huh.
I took a year off,
Okay.
and then I did a much bigger trip, not necessarily on a motorcycle, but I did all the continents. I was traveling for a year, and
Antarctica even.
not Antarctica. So it's
All of the compliments in the Olympics rings.
exactly. So in India we learned that there's 7 continents.
Yeah.
But the more I started talking to backpackers, they said there are only 5 continents
Yeah.
because North America, South America are
The colored
connected,
one. Yeah.
and Antarctica is technically an ice sheet.
Yeah. It is.
It's not landmass.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I think in that sense I've covered all the continents,
Okay,
not
sure.
Antarctica. I actually went to the southern tip of South America, which
Huh.
is the nearest point to Antarctica.
Right. Right. Yeah.
And there is a 10-day cruise you can take to go to Antarctica.
Yes.
But I was kind of running out of time,
Uh-huh.
so I skipped that. But other than that, I managed to do some 35, 36 countries in a year.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. And then how did that not change your plans? It could be that in that year you could have had experiences which would have say discouraged you, or or maybe in the opposite direction, encouraged you even more to
Uh-huh.
move back to India. But how was that shift like? Did your thoughts and your opinions, were they the same before and after the trip?
So the second trip actually ended up becoming another book.
Yeah. Oh.
It's called Packing Up Without Looking Back.
Uh-huh.
So it's a play on word, backpacking.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first or second chapter in that book. I've talked about this.
Okay.
Because when I started the trip, I wanted to start it with an open mind.
Right.
Going back to India was part of the plan, but I did not want that to overshadow my trip.
Right.
So I've mentioned 10 different possibilities that I had thought about,
Yeah.
how I would end up after this trip, or where I would end up
Yeah.
after this trip.
Yeah.
So I had some thoughts in mind, just like you said, maybe I'll end up in some,
Yeah.
God-forsaken country that I
Yeah.
never heard about and I
Yeah.
just fell in love with.
Right.
Might end up doing some odd job
Yeah.
because I want to be there, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. I've
Yeah.
heard a lot of stories like that.
Uh,
I've seen some of my friends do that.
Uh-huh.
So it wouldn't have been unusual for me to do that.
Yeah.
But I think at the end of the trip, I'd finished the whole round, and my last country was Colombia.
Okay.
And from Colombia, I was supposed to fly back to the US.
Okay.
So I would say the last week of that trip, I debated.
Mhm.
I was like, do I want to just
Yeah.
continue traveling?
Yeah.
Maybe find a job in a restaurant, or, find a job in a youth hostel.
Yeah. Yeah.
Make some money and keep traveling. But I believe at the end of that trip, I was physically also quite tired.
Of course. Yeah. 1 year is
so-
too much, man.
Yeah. So especially these, more than 30 countries, right? If you decide to do, say, 5 or 10 countries in a year,
Mhm.
you can do it at your own pace. You're spending at least a month in every country.
Right.
But I was constantly on the go.
Yeah. That's like 3 countries a month.
Yeah, and so I think by the end of it, I'm like, I don't want to miss my last flight. I think I'm going to go. It did change my life in ways that I had not imagined, but
How?
only after coming to India. So I wrapped
Okay.
I finished the trip, went back to the US, wrapped everything up there, and then landed in India June 2013.
Did you come to India with an offer in hand, or was it like I'll go over there and explore?
So it was interesting that when I started the trip, I had quit my job and there was nothing lined up. 2 weeks before I decided to move back to India, one of my ex-roommates, he had started a company in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And they had a client in India, so they wanted somebody they could trust to go there and handle the client, maybe do a little bit of fundraising pitches.
Right.
So that way I landed in India with a mandate and a job. So that was June 2013. But within 6 months or 8 months, that company was bought over by eBay.
Okay.
And so that's when I think I got to a situation where, okay, now I'm in India.
Yeah.
What do I do next?
Right.
Right? Which was, I think there were pluses and minuses. The good thing was that because of this startup job, I at least got to know of few people in India, especially in the startup world.
Right.
Because I was also doing a lot of fundraising pitches, so I'd done enough trips to Bangalore. I was based in Mumbai at that time,
Okay.
so I had gotten to know some people in the startup world there. So that eased things a little bit. But I think the challenge that I really faced was twofold. I mean, one is I didn't know which industry to pick because, I mean, I didn't have a background in any of them, right?
No, but
And
neuroscience is healthcare. No.
healthcare, but in India, the healthcare space is still not where the US is. We're still 10, 20 years behind
No.
in some senses. So, what we are figuring out in India right now is delivery of healthcare. We're trying to figure out some innovation in health insurance. We're trying to reach rural areas
Right.
more efficiently. So, I think the kind of healthcare innovation that happens in India is still a little bit behind what happens in the US. So I think that was always going to be an issue. Even the kinds of healthcare companies that I looked at, nothing really jumped out in terms of I can use this previous experience
Yeah.
to this market.
Yeah.
So that's why I think I ended up at TIE, the Indus Entrepreneurs in Bangalore. That allowed me to get the lay of the land.
Right.
Right. So that helped me be in Bangalore for an extended period of time.
Okay, one sec. So you
Sure.
said that you came back to Bombay, right? You were in Mumbai.
Correct.
What brought about the decision to move to Bangalore? Was it Thai or was it like did you get to Bangalore first and then join Thai?
No. So I actually came. It was actually interesting that when I was with this American company, 56 Fashion Labs is the name of the company, which was later acquired by eBay. I was already flying in and out of Bangalore for a lot of investor-related meetings,
Okay.
some potential clients, and as a part of that, I attended one of these startup events
Huh.
where I met Madan Padaki.
Okay.
And somehow we just connected. I told him a little bit about my background in travels.
Yeah.
And he's one of those guys, who loves people who are
Absolutely,
doing crazy things.
Yeah.
So we somehow kept in touch. And when that 56 Fashion Labs gig was over, I reached out to Madan. I said, you know my background. I've
Yeah.
just come back from the US and I'm looking to get involved in the startup world in India.
Right.
So that's how the startup, the Thai opportunity came along.
Okay.
He said that, why don't you come and run our annual startup competition? So that allows you to be in Bangalore. It also gives you visibility into the entire ecosystem, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
What are people doing? What are the most promising startups?
Yeah.
Who's looking for funding? Who's looking for manpower? So I think that's how I moved to Bangalore. And I think that's also when the whole film related, my film career started in a way.
Okay, wait. So when did the film come in? Like, was it after you moving to India?
Yeah. The film.
So after you moved to India, before you came to Thai?
Correct.
So a year before that then?
So, basically, the first week that I was in India, I was in Mumbai and I had a lot of short clips from my around the world trip.
Okay.
I'd done these 5-minute videos in every country that I would go to. I would interview one person.
Vlogging before it was a thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I had all that footage and I was just reaching out to my friends saying, does anybody know a filmmaker in Mumbai? So I would love to hand over this footage.
Yeah.
And, if they know how to edit it, slice it, dice it, maybe they'll interview me and then just put it up online. That was my only goal. So one of my friends connected me to a fairly well-known documentary filmmaker named Brahmanand Singh. And this was still when I was on the road. I was still doing my year-long trip. So we exchanged a few emails. I told him I have some content, would love to sit down and discuss when I'm in India. And funnily enough, that first meeting with him was actually a disaster because you can imagine, I had no training in filmmaking.
Right.
I never held a camera in hand,
Yeah.
and I was doing all these recordings on iPads. So, there were all these weird angles,
Yeah.
lighting was also strange.
Yeah.
Audio, sometimes there was a lot of background noise. So it was just really bad
Yeah.
quality videos.
Huh.
And I think the other thing was that beyond the interviews, I had not taken any footage. So the director was like, I
What
can't.
do I do with this?
Yeah, exactly. He's like,
Yeah.
I mean, if you want to go to a TV studio,
Yeah.
talk to them, maybe they'll interview you, do like a half-hour
Yeah.
travel special. That's fine, but
Yeah.
there's not enough for a movie.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then he just was fascinated by all the stories I was telling him
Yeah.
about all my travels and all the weird things, crazy things that I experienced, the people that I met, and what I learned from them. So he said, let's take it step by step. I'm going to interview you for 2 days with no agenda. So
Okay.
you just come in, I'm going to set the camera rolling, and we'll see where the conversation goes.
Yeah.
So that happened for 2 days. And then at the end of it, he said, if all of this stuff is true, I want you to travel like this in India, and I can see a movie coming out of it.
Nice.
So this is, I want to say, between June, July, August 2013. This is when I was in Mumbai. I was going back and forth with Brahmanand. And then we crystallized the idea down to, okay, we want to travel in India. What do we want to do? What do you want to capture?
Yeah.
So we brought it down to contradictions of India.
Okay.
So be it social contradictions, economic contradictions, cultural, religious contradictions. And then we started looking at places to visit. So if you want to travel, where should we go? So we, came up with 25, 30 interesting places, all off the beaten path, where there are certain interesting issues, social issues, economic issues. And then we narrowed it down to about 10, 11 so that we could cover them in a 5 to 6 week shoot so that it would be reasonable. So by the time I actually came to Bangalore in 2014, the shoot was already done.
What was the name of the movie for? Again?
Yeah, so the name of the movie is Riding on a Sunbeam.
Okay.
And what it captures is me and a friend of mine. Back then, she was a student at UC Berkeley. Irish American, you can imagine, as pale as you can get.
Yeah.
So she'd never been to India.
Yeah.
She'd done a little bit of backpacking, some in China, some in Europe, a little bit in Central America, but never been to India.
Yeah.
And so I told her, look, as long as you're willing to fly to Mumbai, we have the crew. I'm going to be traveling. So all expenses will be covered. But just figure out how to get to India and we'll, take you on this adventure ride.
Right.
So that's how it really started. So me and her, we start from Mumbai and then we go all the way to Nagaland and back.
Yeah.
So even that ended up being close to 7,000-8,000 kilometers, but it was literally all modes of transportation.
Yeah.
So there was a part of it that we did on a motorcycle, especially in the northeast. Then there were huge chunks that we did in trains, some flights, buses.
Yeah.
It was literally a mix of everything. So by the time I came to Bangalore, the shoot was done, and then I joined TIE to understand a little bit about the startup ecosystem in India.
What did you understand about the startup ecosystem of India at that time? Because see, that was a very interesting time for you to come to Bangalore, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's when most of the things that we take for granted right now when it comes to startups had started up,
Yeah,
right?
true.
So, what were some of the key things that you noticed? this
Sure.
time?
Yeah. I mean, you can imagine, this was the era when, Flipkart, Snapdeal,
Yeah.
we think now, as being the big companies,
Yeah.
they were still trying to find their feet, right?
Right.
I mean, they certainly had enough of staff and, they had a business model figured out,
Yeah.
but they still, none of them were profitable. I think some of them are still not. But they were not the big names that they are today.
Right.
And so it was very interesting to come to Bangalore and just see the energy of the place. I think even back then, Kormangala, I remember there were some 700-800 startups already, just in Kormangala. You go to Indiranagar, you go to all
Swiggy
the
had just
places.
started then.
Swiggy had just started.
Yeah, it
correct.
was just in Kormangala, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so it was very interesting to see this new crop of Indian kids who are willing to risk everything, start a company. And it was nice in a way to play that role of an enabler. Right? I think we were together at the Indus Entrepreneurs when we were doing events for startups. We were bringing them in, coaching them a little bit. I ended up running that startup competition for a year.
Right.
Where you're teaching them how to create their decks and how to create their pro formas and what is it that the investor is looking for. So I think it was very fulfilling in a way to not just look at the energy of the crowd, but also understand that there are organizations like the Indus Entrepreneurs that care about the ecosystem and that are doing a lot of events and competitions that will help propel the ecosystem to the next level.
If I remember it correctly, you were also working with a startup then.
Correct. So it happened almost simultaneously. So I was talking to Madan about coming to Bangalore and getting involved in the Indus Entrepreneurs. And I think a month or two before I landed in Bangalore, a couple of students from IIIT Hyderabad, they reached out.
Okay.
And they had just started a company. They had a couple of ideas about products. And, I just got on board. I told them, look, technology wise, I've done some tech development in the past, but I'm already sort of crossed that stage now.
But
So I'll join
making
you.
movies now, so.
Well, not even that, but I think, they were both freshly out of IIIT Hyderabad. So I think what helped them in a way was some of my skills in the fundraising arena, or going out and talking to customers, negotiating deals. I think that is where since they were fresh out of college and had not done that before, that's how we joined hands. I said I'll bring everything other than the tech development to the table. Everything from fundraising, if you want legal financial stuff to set up a company, if you want to go out and do pitches and talk to clients, and if somebody's interested, how do you negotiate deals and all that. So that was my skill set. So both of them almost happened simultaneously. So by the time I came to Bangalore, I was already involved in that startup called Wazat Labs, and then the Indus Entrepreneurs. And it was a great time to be in Bangalore.
Okay. What happened after that?
So Wazat Labs unfortunately didn't work out. It was a visual search startup, and initially we got a lot of great traction. We won the first Google Launchpad here.
Nice.
We were part of the Target Accelerator. It seemed like Target would be our natural client for the kind of product that we had. Unfortunately, Target went through a little bit of restructuring, so we fell down the priority list a little bit.
Okay.
And then the couple of offers that we had, there was one acquisition offer, one investment offer. We declined them because we thought Target would work out. So I think in hindsight, it was a bit of a judgment call. Maybe we should have taken the money. Who knows? Maybe
it was a non-tech call. It was on you.
Actually, yeah. So maybe I screwed up. But I think all of us were really hoping that customer money would come in sooner or later.
Right.
We were doing 5 different types of pilots with Target.
Yeah.
And so we thought that customer money, it's not just the revenue, but it also brings the market validation, right?
Yeah.
So that was our thinking back then, that instead of going the VC route, let's wait for the customer to materialize.
Yeah.
And Target is such a big name, other than Walmart, that is like Walmart and Amazon, they're probably the 3rd biggest retailer in the US.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And so we thought that, once we get that validation, then the floodgates will open.
Right.
Sometimes, these are things that when you're in a startup, hindsight is always 20/20.
Yeah.
So, but when you're in it, you're playing the odds.
Yeah, I know.
You're playing the odds, and
Yeah.
some things work, some things don't work. But the way that helped me was, I was already in Bangalore. I was meeting a lot of other startups, talking to investors about our startups. And that's how the documentary was done by then, riding on a sunbeam. And then some of the investors I knew, they actually mentioned that I should focus on making a movie on my book.
Ah, okay, yeah.
So the first book, which was about the motorcycle trip in South America, that was already out.
Yeah.
And some of them thought that, this is a unique story in a way, an Indian guy, neuroscience, go to South America, not speaking the language. Even when Indians tend to go to South America, they tend to go with some, tourist company.
Of course, yeah.
Some kind of a package tour.
They don't go on a motorcycle.
Yeah, exactly. And so, just through my interactions with some of the investors that I knew, this idea came up that instead of a documentary, which is a lot of effort and not a whole lot of ROI. Right. Documentary, there is a very limited audience.
Right.
So then we came up with this idea that, okay, why don't I focus on
So another question, it just suddenly came to me. How did you go about finding funding for the movie? Like, I know you got a director. How did you get a producer?
Oh, man. So I think I was one of the producers. The director,
Okay.
I just looked in the mirror. I was like, I can do this.
Yeah.
No, but the director was also the producer. So
Nice.
he brought in a lot of experience when it comes to producing.
Uh-huh.
And then because of all the running around that I did, I also got a co-producer tag in it.
Mm-hmm.
But funding was not easy because the director had mentioned that I'll join hands with you and I'll make this movie. But you're gonna have to run around and get all the money.
Yeah.
So it was actually 2 rounds of crowdfunding. First round of crowdfunding, I was a little lucky that I'd just come back from the US.
Mm-hmm.
So lots of friends were still in the US, so I could borrow steel from them, saying, "Look, guys, I've just landed in India. I'm trying to do this, so please donate,
help us out."
Yeah, so that the first chunk came from crowdfunding, which allowed us to crucially get all the footage.
Yeah.
And then once we had the footage, things became a little easier because we had something to show.
Yeah.
It was not just an idea on a piece of paper, right?
Right.
So we had a lot of footage. So we started showing rushes to family, friends. I also did a second round of crowdfunding, which was on Wishberry. Is another friend of mine. She said, just come on our platform and raise some money. Then your story gave us some visibility. So when I was doing that crowdfunding round, your story, I was in Bangalore, and they wrote a nice article about this backpacking trip that we've done.
Nice.
And the movie that we want to make out of it. So that article helped. So there was another round of crowdfunding. Then some of my friends pitched in. They invested some money. So it was an absolute hustle. I wouldn't say any of it was easy. In fact, interesting thing about crowdfunding is everyone that I would go and tell that, hey, I raised 5 lakhs on crowdfunding, they're like, oh, good, that's free money. And I would have to correct them every time, if you've ever done a crowdfunding round.
You think it's free, go get it yourself.
Yeah, exactly. It's not free. Like I remember, I think it was like a 45 to 60 day campaign on Wishberry.
Yeah.
I must have on average, I must have slept 3 to 4 hours a night.
Oh my God.
Because you're waking up every half an hour, 1 hour, you're checking, did anybody donate? How much more do I need to raise?
Yeah.
So it's that mental stress, right, that comes with it, because Wishberry is an all or nothing platform. If you
is it?
Yeah, at least it used to be. I don't know what it is now. But if you don't hit your goal, then you get nothing.
Okay, all the money is refunded back, is it?
So it was quite nerve-wracking.
Yeah.
But I managed to hit my goal and managed to finish that film. I think it was a crowdfunding, if I remember it right, that gave me access to some of the investors in the second film.
Nice.
Because I think they noticed that this guy is running around, doing this crowdfunding. Yeah. There's an article on News Story. They're trying to do all of this stuff. So why is this guy not focusing on something that will get a better ROI?
Right. Yeah.
So that was the genesis of the second project, which is, we have the script in place now. The pandemic naturally put it on the back burner because it's a travel film. It's going to be shot across 3 different countries.
Yeah.
And in the pandemic, you just couldn't even visit the countries. I mean,
Right.
forget about shooting films. We weren't even allowed to go to those countries. But this year, we're bringing it back on track. So everything is lined up now. And we're hoping that we'll shoot the film by the end of the year. And then sometime next year, it'll be out.
Okay. Let's switch gears and talk about another aspect of your life,
Uh-huh.
which is writing columns.
Uh-huh.
You write for The Wire.
Uh-huh.
You've written for The Mint.
Uh-huh.
Are there more?
Scroll.
Scroll.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. What's that like? Because I think I think you hit all of those areas just at the right point. Like, from getting to Bangalore in 2013-14 when everything was still nascent,
Yeah.
to writing about some of the political issues in India
Uh-huh.
when, it hasn't been more political. Like, since I can remember. Yeah. So, yeah.
So I think it all happened with 2014, right? A lot of
Yeah.
things changed after 2014. I mean, if you want to be honest about it, certain things have obviously been good, but there are also a lot of things that have gone wrong in the last 8 to 10 years, right?
Right.
And so it was probably a natural progression of my interest in writing. So came to Bangalore. I was still on WhatsApp back then. And I noticed that the propaganda that started from, say, June 2013,
Yeah.
I thought that after the elections it will kind of die down,
Right.
but it never did.
It's a
It
big machine.
only went up. Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I had all the writing that I had done from around the world. I had that in the plan that I want to finish my second book. But because of this propaganda, I could never focus on my writing. So I quit WhatsApp, finished the second book. And that gave me the confidence, if you will, or even the desire to start writing about it. Because entrepreneurship is such an uphill battle to begin with, that the policy framework matters a lot.
Right.
When it comes to the government either helping or hindering the startup ecosystem, policies start mattering a lot.
Of course.
It's literally everything from freedom of expression to how easy it is to go and register a company, to basic trust in the ecosystem.
Right.
Right? When you're going and walking into a client's office, if there is no trust in the system, it's even more difficult to get that same B2B deal done.
Right.
So I think, there are lots of things that I started noticing, even the social fabric, right? I mean, people's willingness to go to academia, do research, and then spin startups out of it. There has to be that ecosystem. There has to be some level of rule of law,
Right.
law and order in the society for people to even venture out and do startups. So a lot of this stuff started just going haywire after 2014. And I finished my second book, and then just kept that habit. I never went back to WhatsApp, which I'm glad about. And that gave me the time and space to read what I want to read, and then also start writing.
Right.
So it really started because of the political trends that I noticed, the dangers they're bringing to the table, and then my natural desire to just continue to write.
Right. What did you mostly write about?
It was mostly about socio-political issues. Occasionally, I would also write a little bit about economic issues, but primarily about socio-political issues. So when you look at Western countries, I understand that India is not where any of these Western countries are today. They're developed, their per capita income is say 50, 60,000. We are still stuck at $2,000 per capita income. So we have a long way to go. There is a process of evolution that every country has to go through.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I think the primary challenge that I see now, and what I write about mostly, is the dangers of the social atmosphere that's being created. Because, when I come to India, talk to my family and friends, a lot of the perception, or at least the argument, almost like a apologist's argument today, is that, oh, but he's building infrastructure, right? Maybe this will go on for 10, 15 years, and, we'll come back to, having social harmony again.
Right.
But that's not how it happens. The social fabric, once you break it, it's very difficult to bring it back to where it was.
Correct.
And that's the danger that I see. Now look at China. They've built infrastructure much faster than we have.
Yeah.
But because
what
of
cost?
their exactly at what cost, you have to start asking that question, right?
Yeah.
Today, China is in a situation where they thought that they were the superpower already.
Yeah.
And look at what the economy has done in the last 2 years.
Right.
It's decelerated, exports have gone down,
Yeah.
people are not willing to move to China. I mean,
Yeah.
how many of your friends do you know who are, excited about relocating to China, starting a business? None, right?
Yeah.
And compare that to the US.
Right.
I think that's an indicator, right? That like the last 10, 20, 30 years, most of the companies that are household names today have come out of the US.
Of course. Yeah.
And I'm sure they're largely driven by immigrants.
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot
Almost
of the
all
big
of them.
names. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think that is something that we need to start thinking about. If this apologist argument that we're building infrastructure and that's why it's okay to give up on the social fabric a little bit.
Yeah.
It's it kind of goes back to the emergency.
Right.
Indira Gandhi's emergency. Indira Gandhi thought that if I'm a dictator for a couple of years, I'm gonna solve all the problems, garibi hatao, and then suddenly we're gonna enter in this golden age.
Yeah.
We are still paying the price for Indira Gandhi's emergency.
Right.
And that's what I see happening. I mean, sure, infrastructure will get built, but if you destroy that social fabric and harmony and you don't bring in the rule of law,
Yeah.
which was one of the biggest hopes, right? Bring in rule of law, make the judiciary more efficient,
Yeah.
reduce the pendency of cases in the judiciary. None of that has happened. If anything, there are more frivolous lawsuits now in the judiciary where, the pendency is just going up.
Yeah.
So what is the incentive for businesses to move to India anymore?
Right.
The government has already created so many roadblocks in terms of movement of capital, in terms of your labor policies and land policies. On top of that, the judiciary is not efficient. So if something goes wrong, the investors or even the business people who are coming to India, they're left hanging. So I think these are the things that I started noticing. I was at least optimistic in terms of the business side of things when Modi was elected. I thought that this guy may be harmful for the social fabric, but at least will do some things that are positive for the business. But it's been quite a disappointment. So that really prompted me to write because I'm passionate about the ecosystem in India. I want to see it evolve, but it's going to be very difficult to bring that social fabric back. That is also critical for getting academicians back to India.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the US, the entire ecosystem has always been driven by the defense industry that the central government supports. So when a defense industry creates some kind of innovation and it outlives its utility, defense industry typically makes it available for civilian use.
Yeah.
GPS is a perfect example.
Yeah.
Was developed by the defense industry in the US and then it was made available to the wider public. And then it's the academia.
Right.
So if you're doing cutting edge research, you pump in $100 million into cutting edge basic science research. Maybe only 10 million worth of research will get spun off as useful products.
Right.
But you still have to do that 100 million investment, and as a return on that $100 million investment, you at least have to get world class research papers out of it.
Correct.
We are nowhere. As a country, we are nowhere in terms of that kind of academic research that can slowly start spinning off cutting edge products, which will dominate the globe. So that's the reason why even Narayan Murthy keeps saying that we don't have a single product that has come out of India today that dominates the global market, right? Maybe UPI, it's an interesting start.
Yeah.
But even then, that's the utility of UPI. The Western world has already figured it out.
Right.
Not UPI exactly, but digital payments. UPI is not very useful to them. To other developing countries, to African countries.
It's good for us for like leapfrog the entire. Yeah.
Correct. Exactly. So it's good innovation in the context of India.
Yeah.
But still, we are lacking that one flagship product that's come out of India.
Yeah.
That is a household name in the West.
Yes.
That still hasn't happened. Right. And I think these are the issues that, the more I started seeing them, I just felt like, oh my God, I have to start writing about it.
Yeah. So is this also what prompted the move back to the US?
Uh, I think so. When I moved back to the US in January 2020, this South America project was about to take off. So that was my initial instinct to move back to the US. That the project was going to be executed out of LA.
Yeah.
So I had to be back in the US. But after going back to the US, I've started feeling increasingly more disconnected with India now.
Yeah.
And even when you look at the policies and the general trajectory of the country, I think the first term of Modi wasn't as detrimental to the social fabric as the second term has been. I think in some ways they were holding their horses in the first term. Uh, Economically, yeah, demonetization was pretty bad. The way they rolled out GST was bad. But these are things that you can still recover from,
Yeah.
right? I mean, a few years, you kind of come out of all the mess that was created. But then in the second term, especially clamping down on media, clamping down on filmmakers, artists. These are things that are extremely dangerous to, not just the country, but also the image that's being portrayed outside.
Absolutely.
Right. So I talk to a lot of people in Bollywood now. I talk to a lot of people in Hollywood, and just the case that happened a few days ago.
Yeah.
There's this Tamil movie
Yeah.
where they're showing Muslim guy teaching a Brahmin girl to cook non-vegetarian food, and
Yes,
it somehow hurt somebody's sentiments.
Taken down.
And Netflix, without even debating, they just took the entire film down.
Yeah.
So, if you're an artist, if you're a filmmaker, it's increasingly difficult to be in India and create the art that you want to create.
Right.
There is naturally an entire machine and funding available if you're creating art that panders to the powers that be. But that's not an artist's first instinct.
Right.
You want to tell a story that you're passionate about.
Yeah.
So that section is, people who have the means are leaving the country.
Right.
And people who are stuck are making quote unquote safe movies.
Yes. Yeah.
Movies that will not ruffle any feathers.
Yeah.
So in the end is the country that's at a loss, right?
Right.
If you're not giving people freedom of expression and the ability to explore and tell stories, it's the country's loss.
Right. So you hold that unique. You have perspectives both in the West and in India, right? You've grown up at both places.
Mm-hmm.
So you just mentioned about the image changing in the West, right? So can you tell us how? How do you think? What do you think is changing?
So I think just the perception that India was this fairly liberal democracy, although struggling in several aspects, it was at least on the right track. That was the perception when I came back to India in 2013. There were lots of issues, poverty, infrastructure, lack of education, all of these things were there. But there was a perception that this is a democracy that gives voices to all sections of society. The elections had slowly become more and more fair, and even the opposition used to have a say. So there was a perception that the country is on the right track.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that has changed in the last 5-10 years. It's funny that in India today, if something good about India gets noticed in the Western world, we are suddenly propagating that everywhere.
Right.
But when Western countries say something bad about India, then there is certainly a Western agenda.
Yeah.
That these guys are anti-India. They don't want India to grow. Yeah, there is some big conspiracy.
Yeah.
So that's a whole lot of nonsense. Most of these big media houses in the US, they're independent. If you open New York Times, CNN, Washington Post, any of these outlets, any day, you'll find so many articles that are criticizing their own government.
Right.
Which
is important.
Exactly. I think what we have done in India is we've forgotten the role of the media. The media's role has always been to hold the powers that be accountable.
Yeah.
And the way this government has controlled the media, essentially bought out most of the media.
Right. You've written for a lot of popular media houses, right?
Yeah.
Has there ever been a case in which you've submitted something in your own writing and that has been edited out when you saw it in the final form?
Oh yeah, I had to actually withdraw one article.
Oh, okay.
Because the editor took out criticism of this government. There was one paragraph in the end
Okay.
which criticized the government. The publishing house actually went ahead without telling me. They published it by editing out that paragraph. So then I took down the article. I asked them to withdraw the article, and then I went to the Wire, and the Wire published the article.
Oh, okay.
So this is quite rampant in Indian media now. It's you talk to any author writer who is willing to write against the establishment, either the editors or the writers. They'll either get edited out the way I did, but there'll be repercussions for the media house also.
What kind of repercussions?
So, you've probably heard FIRs against, Wire is a favorite target of this establishment. The Wire probably spending more on fighting in court than actually paying the journalists today, right? But even Scroll, there have been frivolous lawsuits against Scroll. So, yeah, this is quite common in the circles where people are actually willing to speak up against the government.
Right.
Very rampant. So,
okay. Let's again switch gears.
Mhm.
What is on the table right now? What are some of the things that you're working on currently?
Yeah, so I think it's been a decade of evolution, I would say. So I mentioned June 2013 is when I accidentally got into the film world.
Right.
And over the last 10 years, I've slowly switched to full-time filmmaking now.
Yeah.
So about a year ago, I moved to Los Angeles. So I got together with a veteran filmmaker, Sanjay Bhattacharya, and we've set up a production house there.
Nice.
And we have multiple projects in the pipeline now. So one of them being an adaptation of this book, A Ghost of Che. That's in the works. There is a couple of other web series / film projects that are going on.
Nice. What brought you to Bangalore? It wasn't just this, right?
Oh yeah. I wish. In a year or two, I hope this brings me back to Bangalore. But no, I actually am visiting for family and friends. It was supposed to be a vacation, but I'm also doing a series of talks at mostly academic institutions, but also at the Bangalore International Center.
Okay.
About the dangers of AI to artists and journalists. So,
okay. Can you give us like a brief of that?
Brief, yeah. So I think what I'm looking at is really a spectrum where at one end you have artists, you have writers, musicians, painters, graphics designers who create something they actually want to own the copyright.
Right.
And AI is disrupting that entire incentive structure, right?
Yeah.
The whole idea of copyrights or intellectual property was that you've created something. Once you have that copyright, then you can go monetize it.
Right.
Now AI is disrupting the incentive structures there, and then on the other end of the spectrum, content creation without any attribution.
Yeah.
Right, AI can churn out content, visual art, audio, articles, you name
in
it.
any form, yeah.
In any form, right? And you can start spreading that without knowing who created it or without even having the ability to hold anybody accountable.
Right.
So I think that's the spectrum I'm looking at. So on one end of the spectrum, you'll see that artists are suffering. If you look at the Hollywood strikes that recently happened, writers and actors, it was largely driven by adoption of AI.
Right.
And then on the other spectrum, I think the media houses and journalists are suffering because there's so much content that you can churn out.
Right.
And through social media, you can cheaply start spreading that content.
Right.
So it's a danger to not just journalists and media houses, but also to democracies in general. So I think that's the tone of the lectures that I'm doing.
Okay, awesome. All right. Let's move on to another segment of the show in which I ask you would you rather questions.
Okay.
And those would you rather questions are taken from ChatGPT. So again, let's see how dangerous they are.
Okay.
Would you rather be an Olympic athlete or a Nobel Prize winning scientist?
Wow.
Yeah. Let's say you're like 3 or 4 year old again, and you have the ability to start training, and considering you have the physical aptitude and mental aptitude for either.
So I think it's interesting that you asked this question because there was a point in my life when my answer probably would have been Nobel Prize winning scientist, because I was deeply into the academic world and enamored by science.
Right.
But now, looking back, I think the Olympic athlete would be an interesting choice because the way my life has evolved, I would have loved to be an athlete, won a few medals, and then retired and be like, okay, now I at least have half my life to do something else.
Yeah. So what sport would you choose? Something that allows you to retire early. Gymnastics.
Badminton has always been my first love.
Oh, yeah.
So I think when I was growing up in India, we didn't have all the facilities and the glamour associated with badminton that's associated today. But these are the golden days for badminton in India. So I would have loved to do that.
Okay. Next question. Would you rather live in a world where everyone knows your thoughts or no one knows your thoughts?
Wow. Again, it's been an evolution. So I used to be an extremely private person. Even social media usage and everything was very limited, and I would, be very reluctant to share my thoughts. But that first book was quite a revelation for me, especially hearing from people who had never interacted with me, who I did not know anything about. When I started interacting with them, I was like, wow, storytelling is such a powerful medium.
Yeah.
It connects with so many people that you might not feel that your thoughts are interesting or exciting, but
they are.
Yeah, they connect with a lot of people. So now I think I've sort of gone to that other end where maybe because of my creative instincts or even some of the socio-political things that led me to write, I think I've become more open. But not every thought.
Not every thought, of course. Yeah. All right. Would you rather be the protagonist in a fantasy novel or a sci-fi epic?
Wow.
Lord of the Rings or Star Wars?
Sci-fi... Unfortunately, sci-fi is becoming our reality now. So everything that we used to be worried about, AI is bringing that into reality. So I think I would choose a fantasy.
Would you rather be the funniest person in the room or the most intelligent?
Man. This is a tough one.
Yeah.
I think funny. I would choose funny. Intelligent... I think funny has a longer shelf life.
Funny gets you laid too.
Intelligence, overrated.
Yeah, I know. You can be like, that could be a curse for all you know. Yeah. Would you rather never age physically or never age mentally?
Man.
Yeah. Chat GPT is throwing some deep stuff. Yeah.
Seriously, man. This is so difficult because I love to play badminton.
Yeah.
And I've already started feeling the effects of physical aging.
Right.
But at the same time, the film world is so unique and interesting.
You want like that fresh,
Yeah, and you look at filmmakers, the best work they do is when they actually mature mentally.
Right.
You rarely see a 20-year-old guy making a movie that suddenly becomes...
But I think there's a peak over there. After a point in time, the work becomes not so good.
Yeah, but that's the interesting dichotomy, right? I mean, sports, anybody who's an athlete, you'll peak around, teenage years and 20s. By the time you're in your 30s, it's time to retire. Exactly. Early to late 30s, almost everybody retires as a sports person.
Yeah. But the best filmmakers we know, they've all peaked in their 40s. 50s.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think I've sort of, I played badminton when I was physically young. Now making movies when I'm mentally at least mature enough to think about, if I craft a story like this, it'll actually be interesting.
Right.
So, yeah.
Would you rather have the ability to change your appearance at will or read minds?
Whoa. I think I'm not one of those people who fancy myself being on camera that much. So I think reading minds, I would choose that.
Okay. Rather have the Would you rather have the power of super strength or ability to teleport?
Wow. So teleporting basically time travel.
No, teleporting is like,
One place to another.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like within a flash, you're going from here to there.
Right.
Oh.
Traveler's dream.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like I've done it the hard way. If there is an easy way to do it, I think I'll choose teleporting.
Would you rather have a rewind button for your life or a fast forward button?
Man. But would rewind allow me to change things in my life?
Let's say, yeah, okay. But would you? Like, even if you were given the ability, like, it would change things drastically. I don't know.
See, I actually wouldn't. Like, I wouldn't want to go back. I wouldn't want to go forward. I think
how about just going back there to just observe? Just like, relive some of the moments. That could be a...
Oh, yeah. I would go for that because I was just thinking there's honestly nothing that I would love to change in my life.
Yeah.
There are so many opportunities that have come my way and most of them I've at least jumped on them. Not all of them have been successful, but most of the opportunities that I got, I've jumped on them. And when I was doing those things, I was extremely passionate about them.
Yeah.
So it would definitely be nice to go back and, sort of sit back and just look at life passing by.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't care about both of those buttons, honestly. I think one thing that entrepreneurship and filmmaking has taught me is to live in the moment. And whatever struggles or triumphs or tribulations I'm going through, I've learned to actually look at myself as I'm living my life as a third person. So it's been quite a ride and I'm enjoying it.
Which brings me to the last would you rather question. That's not ChatGPT.
Okay.
Would you rather be an entrepreneur or a filmmaker? How about that?
It's a tough choice. There is an aspect of entrepreneurship in filmmaking also.
Of course. How? Like, can you draw some of the parallels here?
Yeah, so I can compare and contrast because there are certainly some skills from the startup world that I developed which are coming in very handy in the film world. So you can imagine a film project is essentially, spotting an idea, having a business plan, how you want to execute it, doing the budgets, going out and raising money, building the team and executing it.
Right.
So I think that skill set, if you have it in the startup world, it's generally easy to translate that, bring it over to the film world.
Yeah.
But there are some key differences. So, in the startup world, you release a product, you get a second chance.
Yeah.
In the film world, there's no second chances. Release a film and that's it.
The second chance, OTT.
But that is still, you cannot tweak the product.
You can't, huh?
Yeah, once the product is done, it's out, that's it. You'll get different platforms to release it.
Correct.
But there's no tweaking of the product. I still remember when Android as an operating system came out, it was really bad.
It was. I remember that too.
It was so buggy that everybody thought, there's no way these guys are going to compete against iOS.
Yeah.
But now they're 80% market share.
Yeah.
So I think startups allow you to experiment and tweak and do a beta launch.
Mm-hmm.
Just officially announce that this is not the final product. We're working on it.
Right.
As opposed to that, films don't. They don't give you that kind of an opportunity. So it's a higher sort of risk in that sense.
Yeah.
The other difference between the two is that in the startup world, typically it is 1 or 2 or 3 people, key people in the company who are driving everything. Right? They're the ones who came up with the idea.
Yeah.
Even if you pivot here and there, they're the ones who are taking the call and everybody else is just following.
Correct.
Right? The creative world just happens to be so different that let's say I notice a book or I notice a social issue as a producer that is interesting and want to make a movie based on that. Now I'm going to write maybe a 2-pager, 3-pager, 5-pager. I'm going to take it to a scriptwriter. Scriptwriter has his own ego.
Of course.
So the scriptwriter is going to say, oh, no, this is crap. I know how to do this.
Yeah.
Pay me money and I'm going to write it.
Yeah.
So then you take the script to the director.
Yeah.
Then the director has his own say.
Yeah.
Then you take the script to the floor, when you're actually shooting.
Yeah.
actors have huge egos.
Yeah.
So, when you're actually shooting the film, the actor will say, oh, no, it's not
I can't
how
do this.
I can't do this. I'm going to do it this way.
Yeah.
Take it or leave it.
Right.
So, I think there is a lot of, even delegation is a wrong word. You just have to literally go with the flow. Like as a producer, you'll rarely get the opportunity to dictate the terms.
Yes.
Financially, yes. You're going to say that, okay, this is the budget.
Yeah.
This is how much we can spend on
creatively,
locations.
no.
Yeah, but creatively, you have to give up control.
Of course.
Because creatively is the directorship.
Yeah.
So you have to say that, okay, I'm going to manage the business side of things, the investment side of things. But you have to have that confidence in the director that creatively is going to take the right calls and make it happen.
Yeah.
So I think that was a huge difference. And then I think the third difference was just the amount of patience you need in the creative world. In the startup world, you walk in every day, you write a piece of code, or you talk to a client, you create some invoice, whatever, right? You give a budget to somebody, you bring a contractor on board. There is always something happening on a daily basis in a startup. In the film world, it's really nerve-wracking because a good script can take anywhere between 6 to 12 months.
Right.
And as a producer, then you're just waiting for the script. You're really not doing much until the script is in place.
Right.
And you're basically going out on a limb.
Right.
By signing up the writer,
Yeah.
you're essentially taking a risk that in 12 months, 6 months, 12 months, you're going to get a really solid quality script that you can take to directors.
Yeah. Yeah.
And as a producer, you have very little input in that process.
Right.
So that, the patience you need to make a movie happen is like another level compared to startups.
Right. Right.
But, what I realized was that an impact of a story, a well-told story, is much more than an impact of, a product per
That's
se.
right. Yeah.
So, with a story, you can suddenly inspire.
That's your shot at immortality.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
With the company, probably not. Yeah.
So that's what I keep saying, right? You compare the entire history of humanity. What product that was developed 1,000 years ago are we still using? None.
No. Yeah.
I mean, maybe wheel. Maybe a wheel, right?
I was thinking of that, but that has changed too. So.
Yeah, even that has changed, right?
Yeah.
But then you think about art that was produced 1,000 years ago.
Still relevant.
That is still relevant.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I think that sort of pushed me more towards filmmaking.
Nice. How can people reach out to you, Mauktik, if they want to get in touch?
So I don't use a whole lot of social media. LinkedIn is probably the best. That's probably the only social media that I'm somewhat regular on.
Okay.
But then email me. I'm not on WhatsApp.
Can you call out your email?
Yeah, sure. It's mauktikk @yahoo.com. I still use Yahoo.
Yeah. Legacy email.
That's right.
Mauktik, it's been an absolute pleasure, man.
Absolutely.
Great to have you here.
I know. Nice
Looking
talking
forward
to you.
to another one as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot.